Hello again and welcome to the channel. My name's Annie and this is my creative detour. I'd like to say hello and welcome to quite a few new subscribers and new viewers. Thank you for subscribing or for popping by today. And hi to all my regulars. Thank you so much for your support. Today I've got a fun project that I've been working on for, actually I started it early December and then got waylaid with doing some Christmas things. And I thought it was time to bring it out and finish it. So I'm working on postcards, handmade postcards from magazine fodder or magazines. You know, you flick through a magazine and you think there's nothing left in the magazine that I want. And so that's why I'm calling it magazine fodder, because you're getting to the stage where you're thinking, is there anything here, or will I get rid of this magazine and make space for new ones? So as you can see here, I have created two templates, and they're a postcard viewer for you to put onto a page of a magazine and look at an image and say, could I use that image? Now you can see here that I have cut out an image of some boots. It was a feature in one of the magazines showing different shoes, and they had flowers in them. And you can see that I have stamped on it. I stamped a sentiment that says, exploring the world one step at a time. And so I stamped a little sentiment down here. I stamped it with the figure 3, and then I embellished it just with some line work and made it a little bit whimsical, and then put a border around it. And then on the back I have stamped a faux postcard and put a stamp on it and framed it. And this one was just an image in an article, and my auntie used to have one of these maps of Australia, and then it's a spoon holder. And so it was quite nostalgic for me. I remember I'd go and visit her and she had one like this, and I just stamped it with a date, September the 1st, 1982, because that sort of sounds about relevant. And I put limited edition on it, and I stamped it with a spoon. And I've just done a little bit of line work and then put it onto a faux postcard. Now, I made these templates so that I can flick through a magazine and I can see whether an image is worthwhile cutting out. So let's just do a quick little session about that. Okay, now the sizes of the hole are 9.5 by 14 centimeters, which is 3 3/4 by 5.5 inches. And then the mount that I have put them on, or the size of the postcard, is 10.8 by 15.3, which is 4 1/4 by 6 inches. So that's that one. And this one is 8.2 by 12.8 centimeters, which is 3 1/4 by 5 inches. And the base that I've put this one onto is 8.8 by 13.6, which is 3 5/8 by 5 3/8. But to be honest, you can make your postcards any size that you want them to be, so that they're going to suit the image. So what I do is I just open up an image and I think, is there something that looks interesting? And I get my templates and put them on and think, is there something here that I would like to use? And potentially this one might work for me. I'm looking at the horizon line here, and then I'm also looking at the birds, and can I get them in the view? And I possibly could get them in there where I have a horizon line. It's a little bit high. I could probably do 1/3 to the horizon line, then 2/3 to the top of the image. All of the birds are in the view, so I would possibly cut that one out. Let's see if there's something else that takes my fancy. Now this is Breathe, and you may have seen me look at this magazine before. Let's look, there's one here. Look, we could do a view like that one there, where we've got the horizon line at the top third of the view, and then 2/3 are showing the ground. So that one would look quite nice as well. We'll just do a quick flick. Okay. I possibly would be able to pull out a view here. You can see that once again I'm putting the horizon line in the bottom third and then 2/3 of the sky. And I'm liking these flowers in the foreground, so I would possibly cut something out like that. We could definitely use this one. So we'd be able to play with that. And here. What about this one over here where we've got just some flowers? So it's got some nice texture, and you can see that, I'll turn that over. You can see that we could put the flowers in the bottom, just cut off the hand and have this nice texture in the background and do some stenciling on it. So that would work as well. That's a little bit too big, so you can see that the scale needs to be around about the right size. They're getting a little bit too big. We possibly could make that one work. Some interesting colours here. So this one could work as well. So when you look through the view, it helps you to focus just on a set amount of information. We could definitely cut this one out, and you possibly could do another one here. So you can see that you can get a lot of things that you might look at and think, I'm not sure that there's much that I can use, but there's actually a lot. So this one here I could potentially use. I'd probably offset it. Same with this one. This one here looks very interesting. You get the gist of it. You can see that here, just this advertisement, you think, I'm not going to be able to do anything with that. That one would work perfectly on there. Just fits. And it cuts off the text. We could do it either way, down to there. Okay, so we've got a bit of an idea of what I'm using the windows for. Now, how I made those, you can see that I've just used scrap card. I've cut out the size of the hole to the one at the top, and then I have added 2 centimeters on either side. So I've added an extra 4 centimeters in each direction to the overall size, which is close to 3/4 of an inch. So 1.5 inches in both directions to make it into a frame. So that's how I found my images. Now I'll show you then what I do. I cut out a whole heap of images. You can see here that I've got them. And then I cut out the cardstock base, which I gave you those sizes. And I mass stamp all of my postcards all at once. So I cut out my image, and then I cut out my base, and then I stamp them all. And that's so that I have them sitting. You can see that I've got a whole heap made ready to go here. And I can, if I feel like making a few postcards, I've got image and base ready. The stamp set that I use to stamp the back postcard is from Tony, from Crafty by Tony, and it's called Postcard, and the number is CBT0018, and I will link her Etsy store below, and I love it. You can see that I've got lots here and I've got lots made. So once again, I'll just flick through. You can see just some interesting images. This one here, it doesn't look that interesting, but I like it as a bit of a still life. Cut down, like that was just a room in the magazine, and I moved my template around my frame, and I found the piece of the view that I liked, and then I cut it out. And I actually quite like it on the postcard base. I'll do some line work on that. I might do some stenciling and some stamping. We've got a Easter table. We've got some pumpkins from harvest. I've got a journal book. I've got couple of fun advertisement ones, and then these images here, I just thought that they were a little bit quirky and made a good set. So you can see that I've got those cut too. So as you can see, I mass cut a whole lot of images out to those sizes, and I make a whole lot of bases. Okay, so you can see here I have a whole lot made that I will show you at the end, but I'm going to do some on camera with you. Now, I've got 3 to do with you, and I've cut out the image like I said, and I've got an example. So here we go. Here's the image, and this image was joined here. When you're looking at the image, you think, oh, that's a nice image, but you can see that I've embellished it quite a bit. I've done some stenciling in the background, which will do. Then I've stamped a few things on, and I've purposely done them a little bit crooked. And then I've done a little bit of line work over the flowers, and then a little bit of white splatter. So we started with this, and we're going to end with that. And I love just playing with an image and seeing where it takes me. I create a little story. So that's that one. This one here, you can see that we started with a Ferris wheel, and they joined up, and I cut it down, and you can see that I have done some heat embossing for clouds. I've stamped on some birds, and then I've done some line work and put on some fairy lights onto it, and a ticket. I made a little ticket and put it on, so it's got a little bit of dimension. Then this one here, it's a illustration of Venice, and it actually, there was 3 images in it, and you can see that I have made one of them, and it says, today's plan is to consume coffee, which is interesting because when you go to Venice, you're going to be sightseeing. You've got all these beautiful things to look at, but it's a little bit of fun being that you're going to spend time drinking coffee. You can see that I have done a little bit of line work. I've stamped on it, done some heat embossing, and stamped some coffee rings. So that's what we're going to make, and then we'll go through some of the other ones that I've made here at the end. So let's get started. Okay, so we'll start with this one because this one's fairly easy, and you can see that I have cut down this one a little bit smaller. I've just made the postcard a little bit smaller on this particular one, but I'm not going to worry about it for this one. I'm going to leave it the size that I told you. And the reason I did that was because this image, when I was cutting it, I tore it. I tore it with my knife and it frayed. So I had to cut it a little bit shorter, which meant that I then had to cut my postcard down. But let's do a little bit of line work. You can see that I have stamped this with my sentiment, and I've heat embossed it with just some clear. And I'm going to just do a little bit of line work on this. I'm just going to get my 0.1, that's a Stedler pigment liner, and I'm just going to do a little bit of line work and go over mainly where there would be reflection or where there would be shadow is what I tend to do. I try and make it a little bit sketchy. I don't stick to, being precise or anything, and I keep my pen moving fairly quickly. If I'm doing it too precisely, then I tend to make more mistakes, I think. Okay, that will do. I've done enough scratchy lines on that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to glue that to the base, and I'm using glue stick. And I'm just going to try and center that as best I can. Give it a little bit of a burnish. There we go. Now, what I'll do now is I'm going to stamp on some coffee rings. So I'm just going to put a little bit of anti-static powder. Now the coffee stamp that I'm using is from Papercrafts here in Australia, from Craft Online, and the stamp number is 591. So I'm going to do it fairly quickly because I want to heat emboss it while the ink is still wet. And I'm just going to use distress ink. I know it's not the best one to use, but I don't want to stain my stamps too much. Okay, and I'm just going to tip on some powder onto that. And I'm just using clear. I hope I'm using clear. Yes. All right, now I'll just heat set that. So there we go. There's our Venice coffee postcard. And the reason I heat set it is to make that ink permanent and it's set in case I want to do any more line work or anything like that. It's on there and it dries it quicker. I'm not going to put stamps on the back, so you can see that on some of these ones I've got stamping and franking. I'm not going to do that today. You can see that that's what I end up using and doing, but sometimes I don't. Sometimes I just leave it so you can put it into a journal and use it as a place to write. So there's that one. Okay, so let's go on to our next one, and the next one I'm going to do is our Ferris wheel. So once again, it's a similar process. I have cut down the image to the size that I want. You can see it's from a magazine. And I've got my postcard ready. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to stamp my clouds in. And you can see that I've already stamped a little ticket that says prepaid ticket. But let's stamp our clouds. Now this is an old retired Stampin' Up! Stamp. And it is lighthouse point, and it's just a blob really with a horizon line. So I'm using it as a cloud. I'm going to put some anti-static powder onto my image, and I'm going to use some Versamark, and I'm going to use a splatter stamp as well. And I think this is an old retired Stampin' Up! One as well. I've had that out for a while now. I use it all the time just as a splatter. And we're going to drop some white embossing powder onto that. So let's make sure we've got white. And I'll heat set that. Okay, and we have our ticket. So our ticket's going to go on this side for that one. So what I'll do now is I'll stamp a few birds on. And the birds come out of a retired Stampin' Up! One as well. And it's called Let's Set Sail. I was saying to my husband yesterday actually that I've thoroughly enjoyed doing this. And one of the reasons is because I have quite a lot of old Stampin' Up! Retired products, because when I got back into paper crafting many years ago in Australia, Stampin' Up! Was one of the easiest things for a one-stop shop kind of to get started. So I bought quite a few Stampin' Up! Products and started playing and did some, different things with my mum. I'm just going to drop on some clear embossing powder onto those birds and set that. There we go. I've heat embossed those. So yes, I was saying that I did buy quite a lot of Stampin' Up!, but the great thing about this project is that I'm using quite a lot of my supplies that I don't often use. Sometimes I look at all of my supplies that I did buy from Stampin' Up! Or from other places and think, now that I'm doing a lot of mixed media or journaling, junk journaling or art journaling, those sorts of things, I'm not using a lot of my supplies. So I loved this project because I felt like I was able to use quite a few things that I don't use very often. And that's always a good feeling when you know that you've spent money on things, and if you're not using them very often, then you think, oh, I shouldn't have bought that. So I was pleased that I was using quite a few of my supplies. Okay, I'm just going to burnish that down. And you can see I've got a dirty mark here from my fingers. I'm hoping I'll be able to erase that off. Yes. If you get it fairly early, it will come off. Okay. Now, you can see on this one, then I just did a little bit of line work. I did do some ink blending, but I'm not going to do it on this one. I'm just going to leave the clouds white. But let's do a little bit of pen work. You can see that I've put some fairy lights on, which is super fun. So I just went around the lines on the Ferris wheel and drew lots of circles for fairy lights. So let me do that. I'll pop back in a moment after it's done. Okay, there we go. I've put some lights on it. I'm just going to rough up the edges of my ticket. I just stamped this out of a ticket stamp that I had. A little bit of distress ink on my ticket, and you can see that I purposely stamped a ticket in a colour that was going to complement what was going on, and we're going to put that on with an eyelet. So let's decide where we want that. Think about there. So we'll punch that. I have these tiny little eyelets. I think they're only like 2mm or 3mm eyelets. Let's pop a little bit of glue on that. Before I set that eyelet, I'm just going to put some glue in the center. Okay, there we go. There's our improved image from a magazine turned into a postcard. Love it. All right, let's do our last one. We'll set that one to the side. So this one I'm going to do a little bit of stenciling on. So let's pop that one there and pull out our mat. And I have a stencil. Grab any stencil that you like, and I'm just going to use a little bit of vintage photo. Put a little bit of ink blending on. That'll just add a little bit more dimension to the back. Okay, that's good. The stencil was once again another retired Stampin' Up! Stencil. Okay, now I have just dried that off, and I'm going to stamp two things on here. I've got a All in Create stamp number 331, and it's Made with Love, and it's got some really nice figure numbers on it. So I'll use one of those. And I'm also going to use a Crafty by Tony's collector, and the number is CBT0020. I'm just going to stamp in VersaFine the figure and also the other sentiments, and then I'm going to drop on some clear embossing powder and set it. So let's stamp figure 2. This one says specimen order ready to dispose. And then the last one is the 7th of August 1969. And I didn't stamp that very well. I smudged it, but that doesn't matter. Okay. So let's heat set those with a little bit of clear embossing powder. I'm happy with that. I like that the embossing is now glossy, and it also has a little bit of dimension to it. So let's now do a little bit of sketching on it and pen work just to pick up a few things. Now what I might do is use my Pitt pens to just beef up this colour a little bit. Now the ones that I'm using are my Faber-Castell Pitt Pen Artist Jewel Markers, and they're got Indian ink in them, and I like using them to make the colours look more saturated. So you'll see what I mean. I'm just going to use some cotton buds to help smudge it around. So I'll put a little bit of green on and just blend it in. And it just deepens that colour a little bit. Makes it more saturated, makes it pop a little bit, because these are looking a little bit insipid in here. Okay, I'm happier with that. See how it's just got a little bit more pigment in the image? So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a little bit of black line work, do some squiggles like I did on that one, and keep it fairly loose. And they don't have to be perfect. It actually looks better, I think, if it's not perfect. So now what I'll do is I'll just do a few white splatters, and I'm going to use Liquitex white acrylic ink and just drop a few strategic splatters onto this. Okay, now I just dried that off. I'm going to put a little bit of vintage photo around the edge of this one, and we'll glue that down. So there we go. There's our next one, and I'm happy with that. So I'm just going to draw a line now around all of the postcards, and sometimes I draw it right up close to the image. Sometimes I draw it a little bit further away so that it's framing it a bit more if there's more of an edge. And sometimes I don't put it on at all. Sometimes I just like to have a white edge. It's totally up to you whether you think that the image needs to have the border. Sometimes I get the corners to match perfectly. Other times I'll do a crosshair. So you'll see that on this one, it's got a nice little crosshair on it. So there we go. There's that one finished off. I'll finish these ones and I'll clear off my desk. Then we'll come back and I'll show you all of the postcards. I'll be back in a moment. We started with our coffee one. So here was one that I made previously. And you can see the back is stamped with our postcard base. And these are the ones that we made. I made this one with you. And you can see it's got slightly wider frame around it than this one here. Like I said, I had to cut it down. So they turned out fun. They'll be a good addition to a journal of some sort, especially a coffee journal. So there's those ones. Then we did our Ferris wheel one, and it's got a little bit of dimension on it with our ticket. We've got some embossing on it and some flying birds and some sketching on it with fairy lights. And then the backs are the same. And here's our specimen postcard with some figures on it, figure 2, figure 3, and some embossing, a little bit of pit pen work and some splatters. So they were great as well. And these were the ones that I showed you at the very beginning, the Australia one, and it's got stamps on the back of this one. So that's there. And our boots with some doodling. And I have another pair of boots, I think. Ah, yes. So we have 2 pairs of boots with just some little squiggles and some stamping and line work on it. The little bit of pen work doodling makes a big difference, doesn't it? It's great. Now what I have here is just some other images, different types. So you can see that this one I've kind of made it into a postcard that is almost like a ticket to a flower festival or a flower show. So it's got a paid entry ticket in it and then a coat check ticket. This one's a bit quirky. The image had birds on it, red birds, so I stamped bird in red and did some birds going across the road and then just did some doodling. I rounded the corners on this one and mounted it on some grey cardstock just to make it pop. And then there's the back. Now this says here, this side for correspondence, And then this one stamp here says the address to be written on this side. So that's perfect for a postcard. We'll pop that there. This one's a bit of fun. It was a telephone, and you can see that I did some stenciling in the background first, and then I put a little bit of Pitt pen on the telephone so that it was a little bit more intense in saturation in colour. And then I stamped in Versamark all different hellos or greetings, and then put some white heat embossing powder onto it and set that. We've got hello, hey there, what's new, hey, oh, hello. And the back as usual. This one I turned it into an Australia stamp because you can see that the image actually has a little bit of a stamp theme going on. So I stamped a number 5, I heat embossed it, and I stamped Australia on it. And then I just did a little bit of pen work on it. And the back's the same. This one here was a close-up of some tulips. So I just said, it looks like spring, and I heat embossed that. I stamped a bee on there and did some little dash lines on it, and then did some pen work on it. And the back's the same. And the border on this one, I did some little squiggly lines on it. This one was fun. It was a window into Macy's department store. And what I did was I stamped a cracked glass stamp from All and Create onto the window, and then I did some Pitt pen colour on it because it was a black and white image. So I've coloured it up with some Pitt pen, and then I've stamped oops and heat embossed that so that it looks as if the ladies are looking through a cracked window, or they're spending way too much money and they're thinking, oops, I spent too much money. But the cracked window was why I put the oops on there. And then the backs are the same. This one here is a bit of fun. It's a building, and it's got some pumpkins out the front, and I'm not sure what language that's in. And it just had a brick wall and a yellow top on the building. So where the building was yellow joined the brickwork, I stamped a All and Create budgie and just extended the line work, and then just stamped a 50 cent on there and put a little bit of Pitt pen on to increase the colour. So that was the budgie one. And then my last one is of this lovely lady. She's come out of her apartment, and it looks like it's in Europe somewhere, just from the style of the building. She's looking up the street, and so I've stamped go where your dreams take you, and then I've stamped some flowers on the building. You know how sometimes they project images onto buildings? That was my idea for this, that there were these lovely flowers that were being projected onto the building. At number 1532 is the house number. And then I've added a little bit of Pitt pen to make the colouring a little bit more saturated. Then put some white splatters onto it. So there we go. There's all our postcards for today. Hopefully you enjoyed that. I had so much fun playing with these, and I just looked at each image and got inspired and thought of something, and went looking in my stamp collection and pulled a few things out and had a play. It was wonderful. So as you know, that's my theme for this year, is just to play a lot more. So I thoroughly enjoyed this. Yesterday when I was doing some, my husband said to me, you look like you're having a great day. I said, I'm having so much fun just creating and thinking of little stories to go on these postcards. So here's my frames again. I will put the dimensions of my frames, my postcard frames, into the description below, just so that you can have a reference to it if you'd like to look up the measurements. And I'll put them in imperial and metric as well. Thanks very much for watching today. I really appreciate you sticking around till the end and getting to see all of the postcards. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And tell me which one in your comments is your favourite postcard. It would be lovely to hear from you. All right, that's all from me today. I will see you again on Monday, and it will be the Junk Journal January video for the week. Have a great weekend, everybody, and hopefully you find a little bit of time to make something fun and new. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.